Let's talk, though, to Norman Baker, former Lib Dem minister, because amongst the pledges in the manifesto coming out today is that under 35s can live, study and work in the EU despite Brexit. And given what's happened over the course of the last 24 hours and the shift to the right that's happened in many countries in the European Union, I wonder if that's going to change any of the Lib Dems' suggestions. Norman, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to talk to you, yeah. What do you make of it all?
Well, I don't think it will affect that particular policy. And I think there's a general understanding that the ability of students and young people to move across borders for educational purposes is a good thing. And we've lost some of that with Brexit. If we can reinstate that I think will be fine. And it's worth on the European elections just saying, we haven't seen the full results, or I haven't anyway, but the centre-right, I understand, is the largest bloc in the European Parliament. So although the far right gain seats, it won't change the overall mix in terms of the decision-making within the European Parliament.
No, but it might change policy, because it certainly seems as though individual countries and their representatives are going to be much less keen on net zero. They're going to be much less keen on some of the immigration numbers which are coming out of the EU. And seemingly, certainly Ursula von der Leyen might have to make some slightly different alliances with people, which would change and could change quite a lot of their overall policy, no?
Well, I think the European Parliament elections, as they were in this country when we were part of the EU, were often a referendum on national policies, and that's what people vote for. And there's an unhappiness about the standard of living, about the state of public services across Europe, as indeed there is in this country, which is why in the Lib Dem manifesto, if we're going to get onto that, we've pledged to take action on the health service and social care in particular.
Yes. Well, we can talk about that in a second, but let me just ask you about the EU movement question, because if the Lib Dems want to make it possible for under 35s to live, study and work in the EU, that's fine, but how?
Well, it's just a question of an arrangement with the European Union. I think the European Union actually did offer the present government about 3 months ago an arrangement to make it much easier for people under 30 to travel across to Europe, and the Tory government rejected that flat out, which I think was a pity, because one of the great things about growing up is that the ability to move to different countries, see different cultures, and study elsewhere. And that's one of the sadnesses of us leaving the EU. That's been cut off for young people. I know my daughter's generation in particular feel very aggrieved about that.
You can do it. It's just it's maybe not as easy as it used to be.
No, it's much more difficult than it used to be. And we should make these matters easier. We want our people as they grow up to be given a wide spectrum of opinion, a wide spectrum of experience, which will set them well for later on in life. And narrowing things down for young people is not a good idea.
Yes, but then you have to be aware, though, as well, that you're not making out that things can't be done when they can. If you can make them easier, I'm sure people would be very grateful. But it's not as if you can't do any of these things. It's just that it's a bit more complicated than it used to be. Similarly to going to, I went to America when I was 23, but I had to get a visa to get a work permit to work there. You just have to do that.
Yes, well, if you're asking me, is it better to have a flat horse race around the steeplechase? The answer is a flat race, yes.
Well, that depends on how entertained you want to be. But let's talk about the Lib Dem manifesto. Obviously, Ed Davey's been out and about. Some people have been critical of him, saying, Ed Davey's all about stunts. He's not really about policy. He keeps falling into ponds and lakes and things and going down, flumes in water. What's he all about?
Well, the normal criticism level about this, Mike, each election is that we've got policy coming out of our ears, manifestos as thick as war and peace.
Yeah,
and that's probably the case. You look at the manifesto later on today, you'll see that there's a huge range of policies which I'm very proud of, actually, including freezing rail fares, creating 3 national parks, putting Premier League football on free to air on ITV or BBC, replacing the disaster that's Ofwat. And we haven't even talked about the health service and social care. So they're not short of policies. Ed's had a policy, I think, and an approach of saying, look, the Lib Dems tend to get squeezed out of coverage. That's the reality. Journalists like Tory versus Labour, it's easy to deal with rather than having a 3-dimensional thing. So he's got Lib Dems into the mix. And having got the Lib Dems into the mix, we can now talk about policy sensibly.
Yes. Well, of course, it's being squeezed now as well by Reform, because Reform's getting quite a lot of coverage because of the influence it's having around the country and possibly on the Conservative Party as well. We've got Suella Braverman today saying that the Tory Party should embrace Nigel Farage, maybe as a leader.
Well, she can say what she wants, of course, but the reality is that elections are won in the centre ground, and if she wants to go and embrace the far right in this country, then the Tories will lose even more votes. But that's a matter for them,
Well,
really.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I would accept that the Reform Party are far right, but you're entitled to your opinion. Let's talk about the new national parks and rural bus routes. I'm quite keen on the rural bus routes because a lot of people say to me, in the countryside, the bus services are absolutely abysmal in this country.
Yes, well, what we've seen is most of the rural bus routes have traditionally been funded by local councils as supported services. I mean,
Yeah.
four-fifths of 4 out of 5 bus routes are commercially driven, and the government's had no impact on that particularly. The other fifth is supported by local councils, and local council budgets have been absolutely smashed to pieces in the last 10 years. The consequence of that is that the number of supported services has dropped by about half. Well, commercial services have by and large remained where they are. I mean, with a very small dip. COVID's made it worse. The government, to be fair to them, was very good to support bus services through COVID. The £2 bus fare, which my colleagues and I at the Campaign Better Transport helped to push, has been a lifeline as well. But we need to go further because, as you rightly say, Mike, there are villages and places around the country, in particular counties, where bus services have gone.
Yeah.
And if you live in a village and you haven't got a car, and you haven't got a doctor's surgery, and you haven't got a post office, and you haven't got access to anything in particular, I mean, how are you supposed to get by? We can't just leave people isolated like this.
Yeah. No, when I used to live in Wiltshire, I lived in a little village outside of Devizes. There was a bus that went into town at 9 o'clock in the morning and another bus that came back from town at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That was it. So, if you wanted to go shopping into Devizes, where the big shops were, you literally had to hang around for 5 hours to wait for the bus to bring you home again.
Yeah, it's a very mixed picture. I mean, if you look at my county in East Sussex, I mean, we've got a fantastic bus service down here, actually, partly supported by the local
Well, you must be in a
partly...
different part of East Sussex than where my kids live, because they haven't got a great service.
I don't know where your kids live, but the bus service has improved dramatically as a consequence of actions in the last couple of years. I mean, I look at the timetable yesterday, actually, because a friend of mine lives in Chailey, which is way out of Lewis, and a village north of Lewis. There's 4 buses a day on a Sunday, which is great.
Yeah, no, that's very good. But I mean, no, where mine are a bit further to the east of there, a bit closer to Hastings, there's a last bus at night at 5 p.m. That's the end.
Right.
It just doesn't do anything else. Let me go back to the football though. How on earth are you going to persuade the Premier League to give their football for free to ITV?
Well, just to be told to do it. I mean, the government can require anyone to do anything if it wants to do so. And the fact of the matter is, there's a huge amount of money in football in the Premier League. It doesn't dribble down to lower leagues as it should do. Footballers, in my view, at the top end are paid far too much, and there's far too much profit being creamed off by Americans who are running many of our clubs these days. And actually, football is a national sport. It's an important national sport, and it's important people have access to it. And suggesting that 10 matches a season are free to air, I don't think it's terribly onerous.
Okay, I wasn't sure how many you wanted to have free to air, but I mean, the football business is of course going to be very much front and centre of this political campaign because it's right smack bang in the middle of the Euros, which get underway this week.
Well, indeed it is, and I just think we ought to be ensuring that, in terms of social cohesion, that our national things which are nationally important are shared by everybody. I think that we should do that as a concept. And the idea of making sure that key football matches are available to everybody is right. I was also very upset. I remember when years ago, Test cricket was taken off terrestrial television at a time when there was a huge incitement between England and Australia. We can't just take things away from people and leave it to people who can afford to pay for it a different way. There are some things which are nationally important, nationally available, should be the answer.
But of course, there are those things that used to be protected, didn't they? Like the Grand National, the Open and golf used to be protected, which it isn't anymore. It doesn't seem to be. No. The FA Cup final and FA Cup football is still very much on terrestrial TV. But I think that's about it, isn't it?
There's not much more. I mean, and some things which look like they're protected aren't. I think Wimbledon, for example, the BBC have paid for against competition. So I just think we ought to be very careful we don't end up with just a society where money drives absolutely everything, because we need to make sure society is held together, and sport is one way of doing that.
No, indeed. I imagine you'll be supporting Scotland in the Euros this year, will you?
That's true, actually, Mike. Yes, and I have to say, for my sins or otherwise, I support Aberdeen, who had a rather mixed season last season.
Well, you did gift Sir Alex Ferguson to the world, so I mean, it wasn't all bad.
That's right, and that's the Trivial Pursuit question. It's what was the last team to win the Scottish Premiership other than Celtic and Rangers? The answer, Aberdeen in 1984. Right. But I'm very happy to say that I'll be up in Aberdeen in August, for the first match of the season at the Toddery.
Good man. Well, good to talk to you. Norman Baker, thank you very much indeed, former Lib Dem Minister, on the occasion of the Lib Dems launching their manifesto, which is a little bit later on today. We'll bring you that, of course, where we are.